Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Aisha. How are you?
Fine, ma'am. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Students, is it visible for you? Are you able to see it properly? Or shall I just switch off the lights?
Good morning, ma'am.
Is it better? Okay. Now, my dear students, we are going to extend our lecture. I told you in our last lecture of business technology that there are different environmental factors which do affect the organization in a continuous manner. There are two places about which we are concerned in an organization. The place which is inside the boundaries of an organization and the place which is present outside the boundaries of an organization. Whatever factors are present inside the boundaries of an organization are very much controllable by the management of the organization. Management of the organization will be continuously striving to control the factors which are present inside the boundaries of an organization. But there are so many factors which are present on the in the outer environment of an organization which are not under control of the management of an organization, or maybe they do have relatively less control over to those factors. But they do have a prime responsibility to control those factors up to a certain extent. So how do they control those factors? First, they do need to analyze that which different factors are present outside the boundaries of an organization, and then they do continuously formulate the strategies in order to control them. So in order to analyze the factors which are present outside the boundaries of an organization, we do have a very popular model, which is known as a pestle analysis. Pestle analysis has been given to us by one of the management theorists, in which he said that we are going to analyze all these factors which can be represented to us by this pestle analysis, and then we will be making the strategies in order to control them. So pestle stands for, pestle is basically an acronym which stands for political factors, economical factors, social factors, technological factors, legal factors, and environmental factors. So with the help of this model, one by one, we do analyze all the factors which are present outside the boundaries of an organization. And one by one, we do make different strategies in order to control those factors. So the first factor we have been analyzing, that is political factor. I told you that politics in the country in which the organization is running its operations is very important for the organizations to be knowing that how the political environment is exerting different kinds of pressures on the organization. Is it having adverse effects on the organization? Is it having positive or favorable effects on the organization? Whatever these are, according to their range, we have to make different kind of strategies in order to deal with them. So let's have a look at them. They say pestle analysis, political systems, and government policy. So in pestle analysis, the first factor which needs to be analyzed is regarding political systems and government policy. So how the political system, how all the government policies are present outside the boundaries of the organization, we have to analyze in deep. So what is a political system? A set of institutions, political organizations, and interest groups such as lobby groups. So you need to know that a political system does not only include the government of the organization, but it is a mixture of different institutions. Like even judiciary of a country is also in the political system. Like army of a country is also in the political system. How all of these institutions are working in collaboration and how are they exerting the pressure on the organization, it's obvious to know for the organizations. Got it? So what is a political system? It is not just a government of the country, but it is a set of institutions, political organizations, and interest groups such as lobby groups. Sometimes outside the boundaries of the organization, some organizations do work hand in hand. They do create a lobby against certain unfair, what we can say, unfair government policies, etc. So these are known as lobby groups, and they are also going to put in or exert a pressure on the organizational policies. So in a political system, the organizations need to analyze that what are different institutions which can have an effect on the operations of the organization. A set of institutions, political organizations, and interest groups, the relationship between them. What is the relationship between the government of a country and the army? What is the relationship of army and judiciary of a country? So wherever, in whichever country you are going to see that these three basic institutions are not working hand in hand, the work is not going on properly. Sometimes the army is against the government, sometimes the government is against the judiciary, etc. So especially in the countries in which there is democracy, the three institutions have to work hand in hand in order to run the operations in a favorable manner. So we are going to analyze, organizations are going to analyze the political system of a country. How is it working? How is the Senate of a country? How is the opposition group, etc.? What are the different lobby groups present outside the boundaries? And how they are working with each other? What is their relationship with each other? Is it a good one or a bad one, etc.? The rules and norms that govern their functions, such as constitutions and election law. So how the institutions of the country are being run, how is the government being run? In some of the countries, there is just, a person who is known as king or a queen who are going to run the country. But in the other countries where there is a democracy, the countries are going to be run, the rules and norms are going to be made by constitutions and election laws. So by election, the policies are going to be made. So the organizations have to analyze the political system of our country. Now, my dear students, in the political system, we can see that the government policy is made at three levels. Number one is global, or known as supranational, national. Then we have national, and on the other hand, we have the last level is local. My dear students, global or supranational level is an international level. There are certain policies you can imagine made by United Nations or made by IMF, International Monetary Fund. Those countries who are taking the loans from International Monetary Fund has to follow the policies which are made by IMF then. The member countries have to follow the policies of United Nations. So these are supranational authorities which are going to have an input in the government policies. Then at the next level, we have national policies as well. Say, for example, there are company laws, there is the constitution or the country law of a country. In every country, we do have these specific national laws, which are mandatory to be followed by each and every person which is present inside that country. And all the organizations, even if they are multinational organizations, they have to follow the rules and regulations which are made by the national government of their country. Then the last level is local. Local and national rules and regulations go hand in hand. But this is little bit specific view. Local laws are going to be made by specific, the government elected persons by the government of a country at a very, narrower level, we can say. Specifically for different organizations, this kind of organization has to follow these rules. The other type of the organization has to follow these rules, etc. So these are the three levels at which the laws, constitutions, and the political policies are going to be made, which every person inside the boundaries of the organization has to follow. If sometimes the global laws are going to coincide with the national or the local rules and regulations, then obviously we are going to give a priority to our national or local rules and regulations. We are not always going to follow the global rules and regulations. They do give us the general guideline. But inside the country, we have to give the priority to the local and the national laws. Now, students, we can say that government affects the organization in two ways. What are these two broad ways? Either the government is going to make the policy for the organizations, or they are going to directly regulate an organization. So the two ways the government of the country is going to regulate the involvement of an organization. They do make the policies or they do make the direct legislation for a particular sort of an organization. So policy is generally for everyone, that this is the policy that everyone has to follow. Whichever type of organization is present, even in the educational sector or in the trading sector or in the manufacturing sector, everyone has to follow the government policy. Or on the other hand, the government has the power to make the direct legislation for a certain type of an industry, for a certain type of an institution, or a certain type of the sector. So in two ways, the government can regulate the operations of the organization or regulate the operations of different persons who are present in the country. Either the general policy which is made by the government for every person in general has to be followed, or directly if the government is making any legislation, any constitution for the particular industry, then they have to follow. Say, for example, in direct legislation, we do have the policies regarding health and safety measures, which are going to govern the behavior of nurses or doctors in much more higher manner than an ordinary person. So obviously, every person or the organization who is present inside the boundaries of a particular country has to follow the policies which are made by the government. Either the organizations are going to be directly regulated or indirectly regulated by the means of government policies. So at every step, you should be knowing that the government, that the organizations are going to analyze all these factors in order to make the particular strategies to, govern their organization. Then government affects organization in two ways. In this case, we are going to extend our discussion regarding government policy. Government can make the different policies regarding housing, regarding crime, regarding education, defense, or healthcare, and many more places are there in which the government is going to give an input by making the policy. Regarding housing, regarding construction, that this much amount of material, cement must be used in a certain sector, or the housing of the persons can be in this area, not in that area. So every person has to follow those general policies regarding housing. Like sometimes governments do, they do exert a pressure on the factories that do not make the factories near to the housing areas, or to the constructed, the persons who are in the construction industry, they do have a duty that they should not be purchasing the land for housing near to the factories. So these are the housing policies which the organizations do need to follow if they are in a particular relevant sector. Then regarding crime, every one of us know that there are some civil penalties, there are some criminal penalties. We do know generally if we are going to do some bad act, we are going to be punished. We do know that if we are going to do some bad act, we can be having some fines or penalties will be there. Why all these policies are present? In order to regulate the behavior of the individuals. So in the case of crime, also the organizations must know that even tax evasion is a crime. So they must know that if they are going to evade any kind of taxation, they are not going to give a proper tax which is levied on their profits. They are going to have the penalties regarding that. So they are going to, organizations are going to analyze the criminal acts in a particular country. They are going to be knowing the civil acts. Civil acts are, or civil penalties are at a little bit, lower level than the criminal penalties. In the civil, if someone is going to, do any kind of civil nonsense, then obviously they are going to be punished in the form of fines. But if someone is conducting a crime, then obviously the punishment will be at the higher level. Got it? Then there can be the policies regarding education, that if someone has to be in the educational sector, they have to get the proper licenses. If the teachers have to work in the educational sector, they must have this much higher, degree in their hand, etc. So the educational policies will also be there, which everyone has to follow, especially in the case of UAE. You might have witnessed this case, that every sector does have a minimum education level set. Got it? Then defense. Defense is a very critical or sensitive area. In every country, we do have different policies regarding defense, which the army of the country, which the judiciary of the country has to follow. Got it? And the last one is healthcare. And you can see the example of this healthcare policy everywhere in whichever organization you are going. You can see that regarding healthcare, there are policies, but specifically for hospitals, for clinics, there are specific policies regarding healthcare. Got it? So every organization has to follow before starting their work and on an ongoing basis that what are the government policies in a particular area in which they are working. Okay, now the organizations do directly regulate the behavior of the organizations as well by making the direct legislation. So if some organization is working in the educational sector, there must be some specific regulations regarding educational sector. If someone is working in healthcare, they have to see that what are the direct legislations for their sector. So government do have the authority to make the direct legislations for the particular sector, and the organizations have the duty to follow those. So say, for example, Employee Protection Acts are there. Every employee who is working in the organization is the prime responsibility of the employers. They should be provided with the safe working conditions. They should be provided with such a condition in which the stress level cannot be increased. Even, in the organizations, there are strict policies. In Europe, especially you are going to see that employees are sitting in the wrong posture on their seats, and this is not, allowed in the Europe. You can see over there, but over here, in whatever posture we want to see, we are sitting. In Europe, if you are going to see, they are putting their, screens above this level so that even there should not be a strain in our neck. So what I mean to say that employers do have the responsibility to provide the good working conditions, fair working conditions to their employees. So Employee Protection Acts are there which are directly regulating the behavior of the organizations in the specific sectors. So in many countries, there are Employee Protection Acts which do work in their own way. And then we do have Data Protection Acts as well. The data which is collected by the organizations from the employees has to be kept safe. And they do not have the authority to keep that data, after a certain particular interval, maybe after 6 years, they have to vanish all of the data which they have collected from their employees. Or they might have the responsibility to vanish all the data, to delete all the data after the employee resigns from the organization. So data which they are collecting from the employees or from the persons outside, general persons, customers, consumers, etc., has to be collected by their permission or has to be kept in a safe environment so that it should not be, leaked. So it should be confidential. So there are different data protection acts which we are going to analyze in detail in our next slides as well. Then we do have health and safety acts as well. Every employee has the right to get the safe environment in the organization. So you can see outside also there are first aid kits. Then we do have, fire extinguishers. Why are they so? Because the organizations are following the health and safety acts which are presented to them by the government of a particular organization. Then consumer protection acts are there. The consumers should not be adversely affected by the high prices which are taken by the organizations. So we do have certain policies regarding consumer protection as well, like value for money. Whatever amount they are paying to the organization, according to that, the consumer should be getting the quality. So the consumer protection acts are there if the consumers do feel that something wrong is going to, something wrong is being done with them, they have to be addressed. Whatever their issues are, the issues have to be addressed. So this is the case of the direct legislation. So anyhow, you must see that whatever the case is, there are legislations, direct legislations, which are going to control the behavior of the organizations, or there are general policies which are going to govern the behavior of the individual. So Mariam, have you understood?
Yes.
Or shall I do it in Urdu also? Okay. So my dear students, here is understanding number 1. Which of these statements are correct? Number 1, consider the following statements. Senior courts are the source of supranational authority. Is it so? No. Senior courts are local, or we can say these are national. These are the sources of national laws. Got it? So supranatural is global one. Senior courts are the source of the supranational authority. Is this true or false? False, wrong. Okay, then legislation and policy can both be used by government to effect organization. Is it so? Legislation, Zain is going to tell me, legislation and policy can both be used by government to effect organization.
False.
False? Okay, why? Okay, yes, this can be false, but please tell me the reason. Everyone thinks different. So in the management theory subject, it's not, mandatory that what I am thinking, it should be taught by you as well, okay? So legislation, direct legislation and government policy can both be used by government to effect organization. Is it false? What are the 2 ways in which the government do affect the organizations? The 2 ways are direct legislation and government policy. So this seems to be correct. Is it? Are you understanding my point? What are the 2 ways? Look, the first way is written on the top as well. Direct legislation, and the other way is policy. So by making the policies and legislations, the government can regulate the behavior of the organization. So only the second statement is correct. So option B is the right one. Is it, students?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, great. Okay, now, under direct legislation, as we have discussed, the organizations have to follow the Employment Protection Acts, which are made by the government. Let's start reading it, and then we are going to have a detailed look. Organizations usually dismiss workers by terminating their contract. Sometimes employees may resign because their employer has breached the terms of their contract of employment. This is known as constructive dismissal. Examples of constructive dismissal include employees resigning due to their employer reducing their wages without agreement, allowing them to be bullied or harassed in the workplace. So there are some employment protection acts against this crime. In most of the countries, it is considered as crime. If the contract is not followed by either party, whether the employer is not following or the employee is not following, there are certain steps which can be taken by both the parties. But when the employee resigns because the conditions of the contract are not being followed, this is known as a constructive dismissal. Say, for example, in the contract, certain amount of basic pay is written, which is not being given to the employee, yet employee is resigning on the basis of that. This is known as constructive dismissal. Obviously, employee is going to be dismissed from the organization, but this particular type of dismissal is known as constructive dismissal. Or there can be any other condition which is not as per the contract in between the employee and employer. If the employee is resigning because of that, it is known as a constructive dismissal. And obviously, the law of the countries do protect the employees against that. Say, for example, in UAE, there is a labor department. There is a specific department which is dealing with the issues regarding the employees. If any employee is facing any kind of issue, either they can go to the certain department which is made in the organization for this purpose, or even if the issue is not properly addressed in that department, the employee can contact the labor of the particular country as well. Anyhow, you must keep in mind that if employee is leaving the organization on certain points in the contract which are not being followed by the employer, this is known as constructive dismissal. So what they say, let's read again. Sometimes employees may resign because their employer has breached. The meaning of breached is not following. Breached the terms of their contract of employment. This is known as constructive dismissal. And what can be the examples of constructive dismissal? Reducing their wages without agreement, allowing them to be bullied or harassed in the workplace. Sometimes, the colleagues or the senior management or the junior persons, they try to harass a certain employee, particular employee, and specifically in the international community where there are issues regarding racism, ethnicity, etc. Over there, obviously, the employees are sometimes harassed. And if the employer is not taking any action against it, the employee may resign. And in that case, this resignation will be known as a constructive dismissal. Got it, everyone? Aisha, Rabi, are you clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, dear. Do you want the lights to be switched on? What happened?
Was better than.
What happened?
I think it was better than.
Was better? Oh. Are you feeling sleepy? Okay. Okay, now my dear students, let's extend our lecture regarding employee protection. We have discussed about constructive dismissal. Now we are going to discuss about unfair dismissal as well. So they say if an organization is unable to prove that a dismissal was fair, they may be accused of unfair dismissal by the employee whose contract has been terminated. So simply they are telling if the employee is considering that he or she has been dismissed because of some unfair reasons, this is known as then an unfair dismissal. If the dismissal is not fair, obviously it is an unfair one. So unfair dismissal occurs when an employee has been dismissed for an unfair reason, that is one that is not on the above list of fair reasons. In the UK, unfair reasons could include pregnancy or parental leave, joining a trade union, discrimination over an employee's religion, ethnicity, gender, or sexuality. So on the basis of different unfair reasons, if an employee has been dismissed, obviously this is known as an unfair dismissal. And in every country, the reasons which are considered as unfair are different from every country to country. From jurisdiction to jurisdiction, these reasons can vary. And in every country in the Employment Protection Acts, those unfair reasons are being mentioned. And in order to be very fair, in the contracts, all the terms are written. So in the case of any disagreement, that contract can be referred. So all of these general conditions are particularly mentioned in the contract. You know what is a contract? What is a contract? An offer is being made to some individual and it is accepted by that individual. When the offer is accepted, it is known as an agreement. When the offer is going to be accepted by the other individual, it is going to be now an agreement. And if that agreement is enforceable by law, it is then known as a contract. If sometimes an organizations do make the verbal offer and the other employee, other individual to accept that offer, it is now having a significance of an agreement, but it is not still enforceable by law. That is why in UAE, when certain individuals, employers do make an offer, that offer has to be in the contract form, which is issued by the Labor Department. Otherwise, it is not enforceable by law. So whatever contract is there, it has to be followed. And there are general conditions in which the employees are not allowed to be dismissed. Say, for example, an employee has been pregnant and on the basis of this pregnancy, she has been dismissed. This is known as an unfair dismissal. Or every person has the authority or liberty to join any kind of trade union or any kind of government or political party. On the basis of that, if he or she has been dismissed, this is an unfair reason. So on the basis of race, religion, ethnicity, the person is being discriminated and then the person is resigning or the person is made to be resigning from the organization, this is an unfair reason. So constructive dismissal is when an employee is resigning because the terms in the contract are not being followed. An unfair dismissal is on the basis of certain grounds. If an employee has been dismissed from the organization from the employer side, this is known as an unfair dismissal. Is everyone clear? Okay, now students, sometimes we do say that unfair dismissal is not always a wrongful dismissal. What is it? Note that unfair dismissal is not the same as the wrongful dismissal. Wrongful dismissal occurs when an employer breaks the terms of the employee's contract during the dismissal. For instance, by not giving the proper notice period for dismissal. When there are certain wrong things during the dismissal process going on, then this is known as a wrongful dismissal. When the person has been dismissed from the organization, but still not been given a proper notice period to serve the organization, this is then known as a wrongful dismissal. So the conditions, the wrong conditions which are going on during the process of dismissal, these are known as wrongful dismissal. So it is important that the organization follows its internal disciplinary policies. You know what are disciplinary policies? Disciplinary policies are when a person is going to be dismissed, what are the policies which needs to be followed? And if the employee is thinking that he or she is being targeted in a bad manner, there are some disciplinary policies or actions which can be taken. So follows its internal disciplinary policies in the run-up to any dismissal. Failure to do so can lead to expensive and time-consuming legal action being brought by ex-employees of the company. So during the dismissal process, when the person has resigned or when the organization has made an individual to resign, in that particular phase, there must be proper policies which needs to be followed. If the policies are not followed, then this is known as a wrongful dismissal. Aisha and Rabia, are you clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Three important terms: constructive dismissal, unfair dismissal, and wrongful dismissal. Is everyone clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, under employment protection, students, we are going to learn about the important term which is known as redundancy. What is the meaning of redundancy, or a certain individual to be made being redundant? It means that employer, from the side of an employer, because certain services were not required, the employees are downsized. The levels of the organization are now going to be lesser one because the employer is not finding it appropriate. So this is known as redundancy. What your book says about it, let's read. Redundancy is the form of dismissal which occurs when an employer needs to reduce the size of their workforce. Maybe because the employer is not having certain, kinds of factors of production, or the resources are now limited. That is why the employer is reducing the workforce in the organization. So this particular type of dismissal will be known as redundancy. So redundancy is the form of dismissal which occurs when an employer needs to reduce the size of their workforce. Legislation in this area gives several typical rights to the employee being made redundant. So the employee who is going to be being redundant does have certain kind of rights which have to be given to that particular individual. In the case of, in the time period of pandemic, you might have seen that very big organizations, a lot of organizations have made their employees redundant. And I have seen so many organizations giving the employees 3 months, salary also, because the employees were being made redundant. And when redundancy is going to be made, sometimes even the notice period is not being served. So in that case, the labor of the particular labor departments of the country do protect the rights of the employees. So legislation in this area gives several typical rights to the employee being made redundant, including the right to consultation. There are some departments in the organization which are for the employees who do want to be consulted, who want to discuss their issues. Sometimes the employees being made redundant, they are so confused, they are in stress that they are not finding the ways that what are the next steps which they need to take. So there are certain departments in the organizations which are specifically for the employees who do want to be consulted. Then the right to a fair notice period, the right to redundancy pay, which will vary depending on the circumstances, like I have given you an example. The right for redundancy selection to be carried out fairly. When the redundancy, is carried on, then in the particular department, they do have to give the priority to certain individuals, and they are going to leave certain individuals. They are not going to make them redundant. So those who are very efficient, very effective for the organization will be kept within the organization, and those procedures should be very fair as per the policies of the organization. They should not be kept in the organization on the basis of some favoritism, etc. Got it? Again, failure to provide these rights may open the organization up to legal claims from any employees who have been made redundant. If the organizations are not following the typical rules and regulations regarding redundancy, then the employees do have the liberty, they do have the authority to take the legal actions. Anyhow, we do know that when some individuals do take the legal actions, this is the time-consuming process, and a lot of funds are also required. But still, you need to keep in mind that in the companies itself, there are some departments which are specifically for the employees who want to be consulted, or outside the boundaries of the organization, there are certain authorities which are for the protection of the rights of the employees. So they can be accessed by the employees who do want their issues to be addressed. Now, my dear students, the second important legislation, direct legislation, is regarding data protection. As I have generally told you, that the data which is collected by the customers, consumers, or from the employees has to be protected. It has to be kept safe. It has to be kept confidential. It has to be wasted once it is not needed by the organization. And only when the customers are giving the permission to use that particular data, only then the organization has the authority to use it. And you might have noticed when you are downloading certain kind of an app, they are taking the permissions from you, which you do say accept, and you check in the box regarding terms and conditions, and then you go on. In those policies, there are the policies regarding data protection as well, because they are going to use that big data in order to manage their organizations. So, but there are some data protection acts which are in place specifically to address this issue. So the principles of data protection, on which principles the data protections are being made. What are the general principles or the rules or the policies which have to be followed? They say, as the business world becomes more complex, organizations are holding increasing amounts of data about individuals, which we have discussed in detail in big data analytics, that the organizations are collecting the data from different sources so that they can particularly know in the real time that what are the demands of the consumers. In market research, we have discussed this. Then data protection is concerned with protecting individuals against the misuse of this information. And recently we have seen, I have given you an example also in the case of Facebook. We have seen an issue. We have seen the legal action taken against the founder of the Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. Do you remember? What was the case behind it? Because Facebook has been using the information of a lot of persons even without their permission. So if the organizations are using the data of the individuals, they must be having the permission to do so. So they say data protection is concerned with protecting individuals against the misuse of this information, which has been collected by the organizations in order to run their operations in a fair manner. Okay, now students, let's read the slide. Everyone responsible for using personal data has to follow strict rules called data protection principles. The General Data Protection Regulation, shortly known as GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation is an European Union law introduced in 2018, which aims to make sure the information is used fairly, lawfully, and transparently. Students, what is the use which is known as a fair use? Not being used for unfair reasons. Got it? Then lawfully, whatever information has been collected should be used in a lawful manner. It should be transparent. The individuals about whom the information is being collected should be knowing that their information is present in the organization. Without their permission, if there is no transparency, the information cannot be taken by the particular organization and should not be kept by them. So GDPR gives us the general rules and regulations regarding data protection. And all those countries which are members of European Union has to follow these rules and regulations. And GDPR is the kind of supranational rules and regulations, global. Okay, then used for specified explicit purposes. So whatever is mentioned, for that purpose only the information has to be used. Then used in a way that is adequate, relevant, and limited to only what is necessary. Accurate and where necessary, keep up to date. Kept for no longer than is necessary. Handled in a way that ensures appropriate security, including protection against unlawful or unauthorized processing, access, loss, destruction, or damage. A data user is responsible for the security and protection of data against unauthorized access, alteration, destruction, disclosure, or accidental loss. Personal data should not be transferred to another country outside the European Economic Area unless that country ensures an adequate level of protection for the rights and freedoms of data subjects in relation to the processing of personal data. So all the data protection acts are based upon the general rules of GDPR. So whenever the data protection acts are made inside the countries, they have to follow the general rules and regulations which are provided to us by GDPR, that is General Data Protection Regulation. Clear? Now students, in 2018, together with GDPR, Data Protection Act has also taken its place in which country? In UK. Okay, so Data Protection Act 2018 is basically the part of the UK law. So they say the Data Protection Act 2018 supplements the GDPR and incorporates it into UK law. What is the meaning of supplementing? That it is taking the general principles from GDPR and then making their own Data Protection Act. That is Data Protection Act 2018, and this is the part of UK law. Every organization who is running its operations in the United Kingdom has to follow the principles of Data Protection Act. They might not be having the responsibility for following GDPR because it is the supranational rule. But whatever is being made the part of their country law, then it is mandatory for them to be followed. So since Data Protection Act has been made as a part of the UK law, then every organization which is having a head office in UK, which is incorporated in UK, has to follow the rules of the Data Protection Act. And there is a strong legal protection for sensitive information such as race, ethnic background, religious beliefs, etc. From where the person is coming, what is his or her race, from which particular cultural group this person is belonging to, that is ethnic background, and what are the religious beliefs of a certain individual. These are the confidential informations and these are not going to be leaked. Sometimes when an employee goes to the organization, certain forms are given to the employees to be fulfilled. And in all those forms, this information is being written. But this should not be leaked outside the boundaries of the organization, and even inside the boundaries of the organization, irrelevant departments are not being given access to that particular information. That has to be kept confidential. Then political opinions. This is again a sensitive area in the countries which are running on the basis of democracy. In those countries, obviously different persons are having the belongings to different groups, to different politicians. So this should not be leaked again. Political opinions are obviously, the organizations do tell the individuals not to discuss these sensitive, these sensitive kinds of discussions in the organizations, or even if they are being discussed with the certain authority, they should be kept confidential. Then trade union memberships. To particular trade union, obviously, if the person is having a membership, this should not be, leaked out. Genetics, biometrics, they're used for identification help. Biometrics, thumbprints, etc. Wherever they are being used for identification, they should not be leaked out because they can be used for unfair means then. Okay, now students, when the organizations do collect the data from the consumers or from the employees, it has to be kept secured against different hazards. There are different conditions, which can make the data vulnerable. So those hazards have to be mitigated. They have to be kept to certain extent that they are not affecting the data of the organization. So the physical risks can be there to the particular data. There can be certain human risks to the data collected. What are physical risks? Like any kind of fire or any kind of natural calamity can affect the data which is being collected, or human risks because espionage or some persons are collecting the data for unfair means from the organizations. Say, for example, the lists of the customers of the certain organization can be used by the other organization. So human risks are also present to the data which is being collected. So what your book says about it: data security is concerned with keeping data safe from various hazards that could destroy or compromise it. So there are two major types of risks to any particular type of data which is being collected. These can be physical risks or human risks. We are going to have a look at them in detail. So data security, threats and countermeasures. There are different threats to a particular data which is being collected, and we have to take the measures in order to protect the data which is being collected. So what can be the different threats? Primarily, they are in the two heads. Physical threats can be there and the human risks can also be there. And how are we going to deal with those? Let's see. If the threat is about physical damage, that is fire, flood, cold, humidity, etc., what can be the measures in order to protect the data? We have to get the well-documented fire procedures. All the fire procedures have to be followed and they have to be well-documented and should be addressed to every individual, should be given. These policies should have to be given to each and every individual of the organization. So in the case of any issue regarding data protection, they have to follow that. Then staff training or backup generators should be there in order to deal with that. Then if there is a threat of human damage in case of unauthorized access or stealing the data in case of theft, then there should be restricted access. Every person should not be given an authority to access every kind of data. There can be PIN codes in place. There can be security of the data. Then if the threat is regarding data corruption, sometimes the data becomes corrupted as well. The data files are not going to be opened. It means that the data has been corrupted. Now it cannot be used by anyone. In the case of virus, in the case of hackers, if someone hacks your particular data, then what can be the countermeasures regarding that? Antiviruses softwares can be there, or there can be firewalls which are going to eliminate or which are going to mitigate the access of the unauthorized individuals. Then data theft can be there, or loss of confidentiality issue can also be there. Data encryption should be in place. Passwords should be present. What is data encryption? Do you know? Yes, so data is encrypted, in a kind of what we can say, code words are there. Simply in a language of layman, we can say that there are code words which every individual cannot understand. So data is encrypted in such a way that every individual cannot understand it. Got it? So it has to be decoded in order to understand. So there can be countermeasures in place of any data threat. Now, students, here is understanding number 3. The requirement of the question is, which potential data security threat will this measure most likely reduce? Okay, so in below, we are given some data security threats, and a measure is being given to us So this given measure is going to reduce which kind of particular data security threat? Raghu Limited holds data about many of its customers. It has recently set up an off-site backup of this data to improve its data security. Which potential data security threat will this measure most likely reduce? Hacking, data theft, viruses, fire or flood. If there are off-site backups of the data, which potential threat this measure is going to reduce? If we are having backups of a certain data, is it going to reduce the risk of hacking? Is it going to reduce the risk of hacking, Mariam? Is it? What is the meaning of hacking? If someone is gaining an unauthorized access to a particular data, if someone is getting an unauthorized access to the data and the data is already leaked, then whatever backups we do have, it is not going to be effective one. Is it? So is it going to reduce the threat of hacking? No. So when the data is hacked, it is accessed by the particular party or the organization, then whatever backups we do have, it is not going to be effective one. Data theft. If the data is already being stolen, whatever backups we have, it is not going to work for us because the confidential data is already leaked. Viruses. Is it? What do you think? This is off-site backup.
Off-site backup
Will be fire or flood. Very good. Because even viruses are going to affect all of the data then. Got it? And in the case of fire or flood, we do have off-site backup, then it is going to be effective in that case. Cleared, students? Is everyone clear? Zain, are you clear now? Okay, now students, health and safety in the workplace. Workplace is a place in which the individuals are working. Basically, organization is known as a workplace. So we have to follow the measures regarding health and safety in our workplace as well. Like I have given you an example of the fire exits, fire extinguishers are there. There are some safety procedures in which every organization must operate its operations. So there are a number of potential hazards in any workplace. Some examples include unsafe electrics, torn carpets, poor lighting, wet floors, top-heavy filing cabinets. So if you can see them, in very detail, you can see that UK is United Kingdom is very keen about very small matters also. Like they are raising the points of torn carpets as well. If the floor is not level, the employee can fall, is it? So if the carpets are torn, even then they are going to affect the individuals. If there is a poor lighting, it is going to affect the eyes of the employees. If there are wet floors, the employee can slip. If there is a top-heavy filing cabinets, they can also hurt an individual. So regarding the health and safety of the individuals in the workplace, the employers are responsible. So to deal with this, many countries have created detailed legislation covering health and safety in the workplace. Key point, the law typically puts the responsibility for health and safety on both the employer and employee. So not only one authority is responsible for health and safety measures, but the responsibility lies on both the employer and the employee. Only one party is not responsible. Both the parties has to act in such a way that health and safety can be addressed properly in the workplace. Got it? Aisha and Rabia, am I clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, now students, regarding health and safety in the workplace, what are the responsibilities of the employers? Both the parties have the responsibility regarding health and safety. What are the responsibilities of the employers? Let's see. Provide a safe working environment, prevent risks to health. Students, what is the meaning of prevention? taking the measures before a certain incident. Got it? That is a prevention. So they have to prevent risks to health, ensure that plant and machinery is safe to use, and that safe working practices are set up and followed. Inform staffs of any potential hazards, if there are any kind of potential hazards or threats present inside the organization, they are to be addressed properly. Provide adequate first aid facilities. If you can see in this organization, we do have a clinic also. Have you seen? Check that the right equipment is used and that is regularly maintained. Set up emergency plans like fire exits, etc. So these are the general ones. You do not need to memorize them, but still you should be knowing, you should be making your viewpoint that these are the responsibilities which should be fulfilled by the employer side. And now we do have some responsibilities which are under the area of employee. Which responsibilities have to be fulfilled by employee? The employee has, amongst other things, a duty to take reasonable care of their own health and safety, take reasonable care not to put other people at risk, cooperate with their employer to ensure they have adequate training and are familiar with their employer's health and safety policies, report any injuries suffered as a result of performing their job, inform their employer if anything affects their ability to work safely. So my dear students, the responsibilities of the employees are purely to follow the policies made by the employer and to make sure that they themselves and their colleagues are safe from all the hazards. Now, my dear students, here is understanding number 4. Is this statement true or false? Health and safety law is concerned with eliminating risks. Is it so? Is health and safety law concerned with eliminating risks? Why the health and safety rules and regulations being made? Samiha, are they to eliminate risks? Yes? Okay, what about you, Mariam? Sorry? How are we going to be prevented from the risks? When they are going to be eliminated, then we are protected, is it? So health and safety measures are to eliminate risk. What about you, Afaq? Is it? Do you think that any of the policies around the world is going to eliminate the risks thoroughly? Is it so? Whatever policies we are going to make, they are just to mitigate the risk. They are going to be reduced to the certain acceptable level, but they cannot be eliminated thoroughly. So same is the case with the health and safety laws and measures also. They are concerned with mitigating risks to reducing them to the certain acceptable level, but they do not have capacity to eliminate any kind of the risk thoroughly. So this statement is false in that regard. Excuse me. Okay, then test your understanding 5. While Dave was running down a staircase at work, he tripped and injured himself. Who is responsible for this accident? Dave himself or his employer? Dave has been running in the office and he has slipped and injured himself. Is his employer responsible for that injury or Dave himself? Who is responsible? Dave. Dave himself is responsible for that injury. Employer is responsible only when the floor is wet, when there is an uneven floor or proper working condition has not been prevented, and because of that, Dave has fell. Got it? So this is, in this case, who is responsible for the injury? Dave himself. The employee himself is responsible. If they might have given the more scenario in that they have mentioned that because the employer has not provided the proper working condition, in the floor was slippery. In that case, the employer is responsible. Clear, everyone? Okay, now my dear students, the consumers. Are you people tired? Do you want a break? After 10 minutes? Okay. So my dear students, even the consumers are protected Consumers are protected against any kind of the unfair ways adopted by the organization or whatever it is. So what your book says about it? Many countries have legislation designed to protect consumers when they purchase goods from other individuals or from businesses. In the UK, this is dealt with by the Consumer Rights Act 2015. So obviously, who are consumers? These are the individuals who are purchasing the things from the other individuals or from the other businesses. And their rights have to be protected by the certain authorities in the country. Whenever the organizations are thinking to deal with any of the consumers, they have to follow the Consumer Protection Acts as well. In all the discussion, you must be strict to the basic idea. Why are we reading all this? Because these are the factors, political factors, which has to be addressed by the organization. They have to follow all these when they are running their operations in a certain country. So this has many features, but there are several key principles built into the act. These include the seller must have legal title to or ownership of the item they are selling. So the first way to protect the rights of the consumer is that whatever is being sold by the seller must be in his own ownership. If I am selling this seat to you, this seat must be in my ownership. The title to this seat should be in my name. Only then I have the authority to sell this seat to the particular other individual. Then the goods sold must be of satisfactory quality and fit for their intended purpose. So quality is a subjective matter. For me, might be quality is something different. For you people, the quality standard is something different. But here the point of value for money arises. Whatever amount is being paid for the certain goods or services, according to that, the quality must be. So whatever is intended by the purchaser or whatever is set by the seller should be provided. So the goods sold must be of satisfactory quality and fit for their intended purpose. When a buyer makes a purchase based on the description of an item, the goods must correspond with this description. Sometimes the sellers are exaggerating the features of a product. So this is not right thing. Whatever is described according to that, then the product should be. If some added advantages are attached with the particular product and it is being sold, then the purchaser is expecting those features to be present in the good, in that particular item. But if those are not present, this is unfair then. So whatever is being described should be sold. When digital content, that is online films, games, ebooks, is faulty, consumers are given a clear right to repair or replacement. In addition, this legislation also extends to the provisions of services, not just goods. This requires services provided to be carried out with reasonable skill and care, completed within a reasonable length of time, completed at a reasonable price. So this list of actions is not just confined in the case of goods, but for the services also the consumers must be protected. Like the services must be carried out with reasonable skill and care. Sometimes the organizations are also only providing the services. Then those services must be involving reasonable skill and care. These must be completed within the reasonable length of time and must be completed at a reasonable price. So Consumer Protection Act, Consumer Rights Act 2015 has to be followed in that case. Students, understanding number 6 is there. Requirement of the question is written. Why is after PLC, Public Limited Company, likely to have breached local consumer rights legislation? Okay, so after Public Limited Company seems to be breaching local consumer rights legislation. Why? Why is it so? Jane buys a television from After Public Limited Company, an online retailer of homewares. When the television arrives, she discovers that it is different model and size to the one she ordered. She also finds that the screen image is blurred and the remote control is faulty and does not work. So the company After Public Limited has sold this TV, this television to Jane, And it seems that After Public Limited Company has breached some consumer protection rights. What are these? Because might be, as per the description, the television is not so, because as the television arrives, Jane discovers that it is a different model and size to the one she ordered. So after seeing the size, after seeing the model, Jane has ordered that particular TV. So what has been described has not reached. So After Public Limited Company has breached the Consumer Protection Right Act. Then it has also been found that the screen image is blurred and remote control is faulty and does not work. So there are some technological errors too, which has not been told to Jane by After Public Limited Company. So that is why there can be action which can be taken against After Public Limited Company, and the After Public Limited Company is not following consumer right legislation 2015. Now, my dear students, under consumer protection, we are going to have a look at the term which is known as a simple contract. Generally, I have told you that what is a contract? Contract is any agreement which is enforceable by law. When an offer is being made and it is being accepted, it is just known as an agreement. When that agreement is enforceable by law, it then becomes a contract. Now, my dear students, most of us do think that a contract is the one which is always in written form. This is not so. A contract can be verbal also. A contract can be done in a verbal manner also. I say you accept, and that wording accept is now enforceable by law. It is a contract. But we do make a contract in the written form so that in the future, if any kind of ambiguity is there, that contract can be referred to. Got it? That is why in most cases you can see that the contract is in written form. If even the law has to enforce something, there must be some evidence. The court has to decide something on the basis of some evidences. So that is why the written contract is going to be having its own significance. So they say, what is a simple contract? Generally, a contract is a legally enforceable agreement between two or more parties. Such a contract is known as simple if it is not required to be in any particular form. So if it is not required to be any particular form, it is known as a simple contract. It is commonly held misconception that all contracts must be written in order to be legally binding. In fact, many contracts can be in other forms, such as verbal contracts. However, in the event of disputes between the parties, non-written contracts can be difficult to prove or enforce. So if there is a contract which is not following any particular form, it is not always written, then it is known as a simple contract. So what is a contract? An agreement between two parties which is enforceable by law. What are the features of the simple contract? Any contract is agreement. Any agreement which is enforceable law then becomes a contract. So agreement is always between two or more parties. So the first feature of a simple contract is agreement. One party is going to make an offer, other is going to accept that. So they say the parties must have agreed on the terms of the contract. Normally this means that one party has made an offer that has been accepted by the other. Then consideration. A contract is always being made in order to give the value to both the parties. The party who is making an offer will be getting some advantage. The person who is getting an offer will also be having some advantage. So there is always a consideration involved in a contract. So they say in many countries, both parties usually have to get some value from the contract. Each party must offer some consideration to the other. Then there is an intention to create legal relations. In any simple contract, there is always an intention to create legal relations. The relationship between an offerer and an offeree becomes a legal one. If the conditions which are present in the contract are not going to be followed, either party can take an action against that. So this is again the feature of the simple contract, that there is an intention to create legal relations. Both parties must clearly intend their relationship to be legally binding. For example, an informal arrangement to go shopping with a friend would not normally constitute a legally binding contract. When one friend asks to the other, making an offer, do you want to go shopping with me? The other accepts. It is agreement. Then there is no legal binding. If the other friend is not going to go for a shopping, we cannot enforce this agreement by law. So behind the contract, there is an intention to create the legal relationship. Then capacity and legality. Each party to the contract must have the capability to enter the contract. In many countries, individuals under the age of 16 cannot enter a legally binding contract. In addition, contracts cannot be formed for the purposes of any illegal act. For instance, a contract to commit murder cannot be legally enforced. So in most of the countries, you might know that there is a particular age level set to make any kind of contract or agreement. In most of the countries, it is 16 or above. In some countries, it is 18. In some countries, it is 21 also. So there must be a capacity to make a contract, otherwise it cannot be. Now, students, here is an understanding number 7. Is John correct? Okay, there is a scenario given in which John is a person. We have to establish, we have to see that whether John is correct or not. John has agreed with Eric that he will pay him $200 if Eric maintains his garden for the next year. At the end of the year, John refuses to pay Eric, in spite of Eric having undertaken the work agreed. John has told Eric that because the contract was not written and signed by both parties, he has no obligation to pay for the work done. Is John correct? John is simply telling that because the contract has not been in the written form, that is why it is not enforceable, and he is not going to pay Eric $200 of the agreed amount. Is John correct? No, because for the contract, it is not always the obligation that it has to be in the written form. That is why John is not correct in this case. For the contract, it is not mandatory for it to be in the written form. Is everyone cleared? Okay, now we are ending this chapter. Here is understanding number 8. Let's see. Government may create dash. If an organization fails to comply with this, it will lead to prosecution. Students, what is the meaning of prosecution? Question, you can say. Okay. Fines and even closure. What phrase best fits the gap? Government may create direct legislation, which is if not going to be followed, the prosecution is going to be there. Can it be direct legislation? If direct legislation is not going to be followed, then are there going to be questions, fines, and even closure? If Employee Protection Act is not being followed, if the Consumer Right Act is not being followed, is the organization going to have a penalty then? Why are you hesitating? Say yes. If the organizations are not going to follow the direct legislation, they are going to have some kind of penalties. So this is true. The first option is seeming to be the correct one. If the organizations are not going to follow the government policies, then what is going to happen? What is the significance of the government policy and direct legislation? Direct legislation has to be followed at the priority. Government policies are general. Got it? If the government policy is not being followed, there can be a prosecution. Question can be there. There can be fines, but this is not going to, having the sphere effect on the business. It cannot be closed. Got it? But if direct legislation is not being followed, the business can be closed also. Getting my point? So direct legislation is having more significance as compared to the government policy. Then charitable objectives. If the organization is not giving charity, is it going to have the fines from the government? No. National targets? No. So direct legislation is the right option. Next understanding, students, understanding 9. Which of the following is not a typical fair reason for dismissal? Not a fair reason for dismissal. Lack of qualifications? Is it not a fair reason for dismissal? If the person is lacking qualification, can he or she be dismissed? And this is the fair reason, is it? Gross misconduct. If the person is misconducting, he or she can be dismissed. Is this a fair reason? Yes. High salary. If the person is getting high salary and because of that high salary, he or she is being dismissed. Is it a fair reason? Is it a fair reason? Getting high salary and being dismissed because getting high salary? This is not an inappropriate high salary. Got it? This is just a high salary, maybe because of his or her skills. So this is an unfair reason. On the basis of redundancy, fair reason again. Got it? So high salary, the person is being dismissed from the organization if he or she is getting high salary on the basis of this only. This is an unfair reason. Cleared, everyone? Okay, understanding number 11. Dash is concerned with keeping data safe from various hazards that could destroy or compromise it. Which two words complete this definition? Data protection, data security, physical risk, and human risk. Which one is it? We have seen this definition also. We have read this definition in our slides. Dash is concerned with keeping data safe from various hazards that could destroy or compromise it. Data security, data protection. Data protection is a wider term. Data security is a narrower term. Okay. So data protection can be against any of the hazards. It can be against the physical risk or the human risk. Okay. It can include the data security as well. So data protection is the wider term. So here which term sets? Data protection is concerned with keeping data safe from various hazards that could destroy or compromise it. Okay, then true or false? Consider the following statements. Employers have the sole responsibility for the health and safety of their employees. Is it true? Does the employers do have the sole responsibility to protect the employees? No. Both the parties have the responsibility to create the safe means. So this one is wrong. Employers have the sole responsibility? No. Both the parties have the responsibility. This statement is incorrect. As long as employers have adequately trained their staff about the potential hazards they will face in the workplace, they have discharged the health and safety responsibility. Is it? If they have provided the training to the employees for health and safety measures, is their responsibility finished? Is the employer's responsibility finished then? No. Their responsibility is still there. They have to provide the safe working conditions. So both the statements seems to be incorrect. Cleared? Now students, we have to start the next chapter. Before this, do you want a break? Okay. How much time? 25 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry? 25 minutes? Okay. So it's 5 to... Students, what's the time? Yes, 5 to 11. So at 11:20. Okay, 11:20 I will receive. Okay, students, online students, fine for you?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
See you at 11:20. Students, are you there? Aisha and Rabia?
Yes, ma'am.
That's great. Who did this? Someone? You? That's great. How? How come?
Change the external audio visibility.
That's great. I was not expecting this much high volume. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, now students, we are starting our next chapter, that is external analysis regarding economic factors. Now we are going to understand about the second important environmental factors, not environmental factors, we can say the company factors that are economic factors. You must consider that all the money and money related factors are known as economic factors. Whatever factors are going to affect the organization in money related issues are known as economic factors. Sometimes we feel that economic means something cheaper. When we are using the word economic or economical, it means we are referring to something which is cheaper. But over here, economic factors means money and money related factors. Say, for example, the income of the individuals. Say, for example, the overall national income or gross domestic product in a country. Even the taxation is just present in economical factors. So all the money and money related factors which are exerting any kind of influence on the company are known as economic factors. And as they are also going to exert the pressure on the organizational activities, that is why we have to understand these also. So in this chapter, we are going to understand the meaning of economics and the two broad branches of economics, microeconomics and macroeconomics. First, we are going to start by discussing microeconomics, then we are going to discuss macroeconomics too. We are going to discuss under microeconomics the concepts of supply and demand. We are going to discuss about price elasticity of demand. We are going to discuss the cost behavior and types of market. In this chapter under macroeconomics, we are going to discuss about the economic growth, the concept of inflation, unemployment, balance of payments. On the other side, we are going to discuss about the government policies regarding fiscal and monetary policies. We are going to discuss classic and supply side and demand side. We are going to discuss about expenditures reducing versus expenditures switching. For today, we are going to discuss only this part, microeconomics, and these first two parts are going to be discussed today. Others are going to be discussed later. This chapter is quite detailed, students. Like political factors chapter, this chapter is also detailed. So we are going to understand all the concepts one by one. First, we need to understand economics. We do know that economics is a subject. In this economic subject, there are so many things which are being discussed, but all the issues which are discussed under this subject are related to the money. So part of an organization's external pest analysis, or if we broaden it, we do call it as pestle analysis. Part of an organization's external pest analysis will involve assessing the economic factors which will affect its industry. The key issue is to identify potential opportunities and threats. So Zain, as you do know that we are discussing about pestle analysis, and under pestle analysis, we are on the second factor, that is economic factors. So economics can be defined in various ways, including the study of how society allocates scarce resources. What are scarce resources? Which are in limited quantity. Scarce means limited. Got it? So the study how society allocates scarce resources which have alternative uses between competing ends. Say, for example, if the society has amount of money in the limited quantity, then they are going to prioritize their needs and wants. So according to the prioritization, they are going to spend the scarce resources on different things. Then the study of wealth creation, how the wealth is being created, how is it going to be spent, is the part of the economics subject. It is useful to distinguish between two aspects of economics, microeconomics and macroeconomics. So there are two aspects of economic subject, microeconomics and macroeconomics. You can consider that microeconomics is a narrower term, whereas macroeconomics is the wider term, where macroeconomics is covering the large area, microeconomics is covering the smaller area. So microeconomics is the study of the economic behavior of individual consumers, firms, and industries, whereas macroeconomics considers aggregate behavior and the study of the sum of individuals' economic decisions, in other words, the workings of the economy as a whole. So in microeconomics, we are going to learn about the responses of the individuals or the organizations on the different matters which are related to the money. In macroeconomics, we are going to understand their behavior, the behavior of the individuals and the organizations in an aggregated manner. So individually, they will be responding to some money and money related factors, but in aggregation, how are they behaving in certain situations? We are going to understand in macroeconomics. We will consider macroeconomics later in the chapter, as I have told you. Now, students, let's read about the microeconomics. They are elaborating. Microeconomics focuses on how the individual parts of the economy make decisions about how to allocate scarce resources. You must know that economics is that we have defined economics as that how the individuals, how the organizations, how different persons in the economy are spending their scarce resources on different needs and wants. So microeconomics is just about some simple units or units in isolation. We are going to judge their behavior in isolation. What are the different factors which influence their demand and wants? What are the different factors which are influencing their spending? So this is the subject matter of microeconomics. Microeconomics focuses on how the individual parts of an economy make decisions about how to allocate scarce resources. As mentioned, these individual parts include consumers, firms, and industry. Firms are usually, this name is given to the partnership, okay? Firms and industry. Microeconomics attempts to examine how supply and demand decisions made by these individuals affect the selling prices of the goods and services within an industry or market. So my dear students, as far as economics is concerned, we have discussed that this is the study to understand that how the scarce resources are being spent by the individuals and firms or organizations. So over here, we are going to discuss in the subject of microeconomics, we are going to discuss that if the individual is prioritizing to spend the scarce resources on different goods and services, what is going to be the effect on the organizations about this? When I do have a priority to spend on certain goods and services, obviously the organizations who are providing those goods and services will be affected by my decision to be spending. Got it? Getting my point? So on the other end, we have to see that if the consumers have the different kinds of responses, the organizations are going to be affected by those responses and those decisions. So this is what they are telling over here. Microeconomics attempts to examine how supply and demand decisions made by these individuals affect the selling prices of goods and services within an industry or market. How an individual is spending on certain goods and services will be affecting the selling prices which the organizations are offering. So we are going to discuss about the supply and demand in the outside the boundaries of the organization and its effect on the organization's policies. So microeconomics, individual demand. In microeconomics, we are going to discuss about the individual demand. What is the demand from an individual? What is the demand from an individual? In how much quantity certain goods or services are required? Everyone tries to fulfill the necessities first. If the necessities are fulfilled, food, clothes, and shelter, these three things are being met. These three rights are being given to the certain individual, then the step of the wants to come. So the demand of the individual is the mix of needs and wants. And these needs and wants are going to be established from different factors. And they are collectively going to make the demand from the individuals. So individual demand shows how much of the good or service someone intends to buy at different prices. What is the intention of the consumer for buying different goods or services? This is the demand simply. This demand needs to be effective in that consumers need to have the cash available to buy the goods or services rather than just generally desiring them. So my dear students, when we do take the name of demand, it does not mean that someone is just wanting a certain product or service. Demand is something when the cash is also, when the resources are also available with the particular individual to afford that product. So demand is not simply, it's not generally just requiring something, but we do call demand something as we are demanding something, we are requiring something, and we do have the resources to buy that particular good or service. This is what we do call as demand in microeconomics. So when considering the level of demand at a given price, we assume that the conditions of the demand are held constant. So over here, when we do consider that the level of demand by the certain individuals is going to be affected by the price. If the price of the certain good is increasing or if it is decreasing, it is going to affect the demand. Am I right? If the prices of the certain goods or services are increasing, the demand for that particular thing will be decreasing, because demand is not just about requiring something, but having the cash, having the resources to afford that. So in that case, we can say that if the price of certain goods or services is increasing, its demand is going to decrease. But over here, we need to consider, we are going to assume that the other conditions of demand, other variables which are affecting the demand are constant. We need to assume this simply because there are so many factors which are collectively going to affect the demand of a good or service. But when we are thinking in a narrow manner that by increasing or decreasing price, what is the effect on the demand, then we are going to assume that other variables, other conditions of the demand, all those factors which are affecting demand are going to be constant. Getting my point? Mariam, are you clear? Microeconomics in Urdu? Microeconomics इकोनॉमिक्स की वो ब्रांच है, वो शाख है जिसके अंदर हम लोग इंडिविजुअल कंजम्पशन को स्टडी करते हैं कि एक इंडिविजुअल की क्या डिमांड है, एक इंडिविजुअल के पास कितने रिसोर्सेज हैं और वो उन्हें किस तरह से स्पेंड कर रहा है, ये माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स है। एक इंडिविजुअल पर्सन, एक इंडिविजुअल फर्म, एक इंडिविजुअल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, क्या क्या उसकी डिमांड्स हैं, वो किस तरह से पैसों को खर्च कर रही है, किस तरह से अपने रिसोर्सेज को स्पेंड कर रही है डिफरेंट गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज पर, ये माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स है। जबकि मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स इन तमाम इंडिविजुअल्स की कलेक्टिव एग्रीगेट डिमांड्स को कलेक्ट करके अगर हम लोग देखें क्या डिमांड है और उसके बरक्स क्या सप्लाई हो रही है, वो मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स है। ठीक है, और माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स के अंदर हम लोग फिर देखते हैं इंडिविजुअल डिमांड का कॉन्सेप्ट कि एक पर्सन की डिमांड कितनी है, उसके पास कितने रिसोर्सेज हैं स्पेंड करने के लिए, क्या क्या चीजें हैं जो उसकी डिमांड को इफेक्ट कर रही हैं। और डिमांड का मतलब यहाँ पर हम लोग लेंगे कि पैसे भी होने चाहिए, एक चीज को रिक्वायर करना और फिर उसके पास पैसे भी होना, उसे अफोर्ड करना, अफोर्ड करने के लिए ये डिमांड कहलाए। ठीक है, क्लियर नाउ? So I am reading this again. Individual demand shows how much of the good or service someone intends to buy at different prices. This demand needs to be effective in that consumer needs to have the cash available to buy the goods or services rather than just generally desiring them. When considering the level of demand at a given price, we assume that the conditions of demand, still conditions of demands are different variables which are affecting the demand are held constant. Demand tends to be higher at a low price and lower at the higher price for most goods or services. So they are just telling us the concept that most often we do see that when the prices of the goods or services is increased, the demand decreases. There is a negative relationship between demand and price. When the price increases, demand decreases. When the price decreases, demand increases. So this is what they are telling, that demand tends to be higher at a low price. At a low price, the demand is going to be higher and lower at the high price of the most goods and services. When the demand for the good or service changes in response to a change in its price, the change is referred to as an expansion and a contraction. My dear students, when the change is in demand is brought up because of the change in the prices, it is referred to as expansion or contraction. When the demand of the goods is increasing, it means that on the graph, our line would be like this. If on the y-axis we do have a price and on the x-axis we have a quantity, then there will be a slope like this. It means that when the price is increasing, the demand is decreasing. There is a negative relationship. And this one is known as contraction when the demand is decreasing. And this one is known as expansion when the demand is increasing. So this is known as an expansion and contraction when the change in demand is because of the change in prices. This is known as expansion or contraction. Got it? So when the demand of the goods or services changes in response to a change in its price, the change is referred to as expansion, and expansion in demand is demand rises when the price falls. So when the demand is going upwards, it is known as expansion. When the demand is, when the contraction in demand is as demand falls when the price rises. So when the price rises, the demand falls, and when the price lowers, the demand expanded. Clear, everyone? Okay, now you can see the graph as well. Thus, in the diagram below, the demand curve D illustrates a normal downward sloping demand curve. You can see this one is a downward sloping demand curve, and the movements along this curve as the price changes would be called a contraction in demand. The way price is rising, the demand is falling, or an expansion in demand where price is falling. So my dear students, this is known as, what is this, students? This is an expansion in demand. And from here to upwards, this is contraction in demand. So because you can see that here on the x-axis, we do have the quantity. When the demand is going like this is known as contraction. When the demand is expanding, this is known as an expansion. So when the price is increasing, when the price is P2, our demand is D2. But when the price is increasing, it is becoming P1, our demand has contracted. It has now shifted to the D1. So this is known as an expansion and contraction. So Mariam, what is going to be the contraction? This one is contraction. From moving here to here, this is contraction. When demand is shrinking because the price is increasing. And Samiha, what is going to be the expansion? This one is expansion. Demand is increasing when the price is decreasing. Clear? So at this P2, our demand is D2. But when the price is going to increase at P1, our demand will contract. It will become D1. Getting it? Zain. Is everyone clear? So the contraction and expansion in demand is because of the change in prices, but we are going to assume that the other conditions of the demand are going to be held constant. Since there are so many factors which are going to affect the demand of the goods or services, when we are discussing the concept of contraction and expansion, we have to assume that all the other conditions of the demand are constant. Okay. Elaborating the concept, they are telling us for most goods, the lower the price, the higher will be its demand. This is the result of two processes. So we can see the substitution effect, and there is an income effect too. What are substitutes, students? The things, the goods which can be used in the place of some other good. Say, for example, the substitute of this seat would be a chair. So in place of this sofa seat, we can use a simple chair as well. Instead of using a juice, we can have carbonated drink as well. So these are substitutes, okay? So there is a substitution effect. This is where a consumer buys more of one good and less of the another because of the relative price changes. Thus, if two goods are substitutes, a fall in price of the first will lead the consumer to switch some demand to the lower price good, substituting the first good for the second. Say, for example, the substitute of tea can be a coffee. If, say, for example, the prices of the tea are increasing, the demand for the coffee can also increase. Because of only the changes in the price of tea, because they are substitutes, now the demand of the substitute is increasing. So there is a positive correlation as well. So there is a substitution effect also. If the price of one substitute is increasing, the demand of the other substitute can increase. Since the prices of the tea are increasing, the demand of tea is going to decrease, but the demand of the substitute, say for example, coffee, is going to increase. So this is known as a substitution effect. So in the case of substitutes, we can see the positive correlation. Got it? The price of one substitute is increasing. The demand of other substitute is going to increase. The same good is going to have the lesser demand. So this is the substitution effect. Now there is an income effect as well. This is where a change in the price of the goods affect the purchasing price of the consumer's income, a change in the real income. If the price of the goods falls, the consumer experiences a rise in their real income and as a result tends to buy more of all the normal goods and services. My dear students, if the prices of the certain goods are going to be decreased, the demand is going to increase because of the income effect as well. When certain goods prices are falling, we do feel that our income is now wider. Our income has risen, but instead, rather we cannot, this is not an actual increase in our income, but we are feeling so because the prices of the goods is now decreasing. We are feeling that there is a rise in income. And when we do go to the grocery shop, we do purchase so many things. The price of one good is falling and we are feeling that now we have more money to spend. So the demand of the other goods and services is going to increase then. Got it? So there are two effects for most goods. The lower the price, the higher will be its demand. This is the result of two processes. So why do we say that when the prices are getting lower, the demand increases? In the case of substitutes, we can also see that when we are lowering the prices, we are going to see the increase in the demand. On the other case, we can see that there is an income effect as well. When the prices are going to be decreased, we feel so that there is an increase in our income, but in reality, it is not so. So we do buy more of the goods and services and our demand is going to increase. Clear? So my dear students, you should be clear about the meaning of the substitution effect and income effect. What are these? These can come in the exam. Okay, now we are now going to discuss about the other conditions of the demand. Up till now, we have discussed that because of the change in the prices, the demand can be affected. When there is a change in price and the demand is getting affected, the two things we have discussed, expansion and contraction. But when there are the changes in the other conditions of demand, then we are not going to discuss the concept of expansion and contraction, but our concept is going to be changed. Got it? What is that? Let's have a look. Market demand shows the total amount of the effective demand from all the consumers in the market. Market demand is usually shortened to demand and represented by a straight line curve on a graph, as we have seen. Individual and market demand considers exclusively the influence of price on the quantity demanded, assuming other factors to be constant. These factors termed the conditions of demand will now be considered with price held constant. So now we are going to consider that if price is constant and if there is a change in the other variables, what is going to be the effect on the demand? So now we are going to assume the price to be constant. Before we were considering that other variables are constant and price is increasing or decreasing, and what is the effect on the demand for that? Now we are going to consider that if the price is constant and the other factors are influencing the demand, what is going to be the effect? Now, my dear students, if the price is getting constant, if the price is constant, then instead of expansion on contraction, we are going to see that the demand is going to be shifting. Can you see? The line is now shifted to this, or this line is shifted to this one. This is the graph which is showing us that the prices are held constant and there are other variables which are now affecting the demand. So when the demand is affected by the other variables instead of price, our curve, our demand graph, the curve is going to be shifting higher or downwards. So what they say, any change in one or more conditions of the demand will create shifts in the demand curve itself. If the shift in the demand curve is outward, this is to the right, such a shift is called as an increase in demand. If the shift in the demand curve is inward to the left, such a shift is called as a decrease in demand. So this is known as a decrease in demand. Obviously, the demand is decreasing. Can you see? The demand is decreasing. If it is shifting outwards, it means that there is an increase in demand. So my dear students, this one is expansion in demand, downward. This one is contraction, but this one is shifting. This one is shifting of demand. If it is going westward or inward, this is the shifting of the demand. So as they are mentioning that this one is shifting of the demand, this one is contraction of demand, this one is expansion of demand. So if it is going downwards or upwards, this is because of the change in the prices. If it is shifting inward or outward, this is because of the changes in other variables where price is constant. Getting it? How is it going to be? Let's see. What are the factors, what are the other conditions which are going to affect the demand? The first one is income. If the income is increasing, if the prices are constant, and if the income is increasing, the demand for certain goods or services is obviously going to increase. Am I right? Now the people are not just going to buy, the needs, they will be shifted towards the wants as well. They will become brand conscious because their income has increased. So if the prices are constant, but still the income of the individuals are increasing, then obviously the demand of certain goods or services is going to increase. Then taste. It depends upon the market, the fashion which is in the market. The people who can afford, when their tastes are changing, they are going to buy the goods or services according to their taste. So whatever the prices of the goods or services are, if their taste has changed, they are going to be increasing the demand of certain goods or services. Then the prices of the other goods. Obviously, if the prices of the other goods which they wanted to buy is decreasing, they will be going towards that. The demand for those goods is going to be increasing. But say, for example, if the prices of the certain goods which they do want is increasing, they will be shifting towards the substitutes then. Got it? Then population. If the population is increasing, even though if the prices are constant, the demand for the certain goods or services is going to increase. So there are different factors instead of price itself, which are going to decrease or increase the demand of the goods or services. Now, students, here is understanding number one. Which of the following would not lead to a shift in the demand curve for overseas holidays? Students, which factors are going to bring a shift in the demand? Shift in the demand curve is because of the factors other than price. So they are asking you which one of the following would not lead to shift in the demand curve for overseas holidays. Can you just analyze all the factors and tell me which one is not going to lead to a shift in demand curve for overseas holidays? Which factors are not going to shift the demand curve? Which are due to the prices. When the difference in the demand is because of the price, it is not going to shift the demand curve. Got it? So analyze.
The price of domestic holidays.
Sorry? Which one? A rise in the prices of domestic holidays? Okay. Consider it again. Domestic currency as well. Domestic currency as well? Okay. Do you have a reason for this? Domestic currency can be a variable for the changes. Sorry? Domestic currency can be a variable for the changes. Can be a variable for changes? Okay. Can you elaborate? Yes, it can be a variable for changes. As per the book, most likely it will be C. Sorry? As per the book concept, C will be lower downstream. Okay. Anyone else? Sarina? C? Afa, Q? Nothing? Zen? Okay, take a time, consider, analyze the things. Aisha, Rabia?
D.
A fall in disposable income? Students, what is the disposable income? Sorry? No. No, this is not disposable income. Extra income? No. You can say the person income, individual's income, you can say. Disposable income. It is related to the exports and imports, but you can consider the individual income, which they are taking to their homes. Yes. Have you analyzed? Which one of the following would not lead to a shift in demand curve for overseas holidays? It means that there is something which is because of price, which is because of why the shift in the demand happens when the other variables regarding demand are going to change, when the price is staying constant, but the other things are changing. So not lead to a shift in demand curve. What does that mean? The factors which are bringing the what? Which are due to price or something else? A shift in demand is because of the other factors, and the expansion and contraction is because of the price. So what do you want to figure out from here? Which of the following would not lead to the shift in the demand curve for overseas holidays? Now consider an advertising campaign by holiday tour operators. What is going to be the effect for this? An advertising campaign by holiday tour operators. Is it going to be happening when this is going to happen? Is it going to shift the demand curve? An advertising campaign by holiday tour operators. Students, what is going to be the effect for this? When an advertising campaign by holiday tour operators is going to be there, it is going to increase the demand? Yes. Am I right? So what is going to be the effect for this? Shift in demand will be there. Okay, then a fall in the disposable income of the consumers. What will be the effect of this? There will be a inward shift. Am I right? A rise in the prices of the domestic holidays. What will happen? Sorry? No effect? A rise in the prices of the domestic holidays. If the rise in the prices of the domestic holidays will be there, then The overseas holidays demand is going to be shifted. Is it going to be substitution? A rise in the exchange rate for the domestic currency. What does that mean? A rise in the exchange rate for the domestic currency. The demand will be contracted. This is not going to shift the demand. For the overseas holidays, it will be contracted because the exchange rate for the domestic currency is now rising. The demand is going to be contracted. So which one is not leading to shift in demand curve for overseas holidays? The first three are shifting the demand. Either the demand is inward or outward. The curve is inward or outward. But in the last case, it is contracting. Got it? So you have to consider the contraction and expansion and the other concept of shifting. So shifting can be inward and outward. Okay, now my dear students, elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand is again the concept regarding the price. When we are changing the price, what is the effect on the demand? The more elastic the price is, it means that more vulnerable to the price it is. When we are changing the price and the demand is affected immediately because of that, it means that the particular good, the demand of the particular good is more elastic. If changes in the price is not bringing any change to the demand of the certain goods or services, it means that the goods or services demand, particular goods and services demand is inelastic. So this is known as elasticity of demand. How the demand of the goods and services is taking the effect out of the prices of the goods or services. So they say elasticity generally refers to the relationship between two variables and measures the responsiveness of one dependent variable to the change in the another independent variable. How one variable is getting affected by the other variable is elasticity of demand, is elasticity, okay? And price elasticity of the demand explains the responsiveness of the demand to the changes in prices. When we are changing the prices, what response does the demand shows? This is known as elasticity of demand. And we can learn this with the help of this formula. Percentage changes in the quantity demanded divided by percentage changes in prices. My dear students, this can come in the exam in the form of, formula application as well. They will be giving you different figures and you have to calculate the price elasticity of demand. So you need to learn this formula. What is that? PED, price elasticity of demand, is equal to percentage changes in the quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. So how much change in the price is bringing the change in the quantity demanded? The more higher the answer is, it means that more elastic the product is. The lesser the answer is, it means that lesser elastic the product is. So you can imagine, you can just consider that this is about the percentage changes. It is the answer would be 1 or greater than 1. In decimals, it can be etc. So my dear students, you can see the summary of the price elasticity is given below. Relatively inelastic. If the price elasticity of the demand is, what does the sign tells us? Less than 1. Very good. Relatively inelastic, if the elasticity, if the answer to your equation is coming as lesser than 1, it means that it is the product which you are considering is relatively inelastic or having less elasticity, or it is getting less affected by the changes in the prices. So for example, tea and salt, if the prices of the tea is increasing, there might be not any effect on the demand of the salt. They are very unrelated to each other. Then unit elasticity, if it is equal to 1, it means that it is, bringing the fair change. Only price is the thing which is affecting the demand, which is not the case in reality. Not going to be the same case in the reality. And relatively elastic, if the price elasticity demand answer is coming more than 1, it means that the price is affecting the demand of the product in a fair manner. So the examples can be cameras or air travel. If the prices of the cameras are increasing, we can consider that air travel is getting affected by that. The demand for the air travel is decreasing because of that. Got it? So in this case, there can be a relative elastic demand. My dear students, if the answer to your answer is coming, if answer to your calculation is coming in negative form in the case of PED, you are going to ignore the negative sign, okay, in the case of PED. So they are giving us an illustration. Suppose we are currently selling a product at a price of 20 with a resulting demand of 500,000 units per annum. A marketing manager has suggested dropping the price to 19 and claims that demand will rise to 550,000 units. Calculate the price elasticity of demand. So my dear students, percentage in changes in prices, how much are these? They have calculated already 5%. How can we calculate the percentage changes in prices? A drop in prices there from 20 to 19. So what is the percentage change in prices? It's 5%. From 20 to 19, what is the percentage? It's 5%. It has decreased. That is why the answer is in negative, but we are going to ignore this negative sign. We have to calculate the percentage change in demand. From 500,000, the demand has increased to 550,000. That is why it is a positive change of 10%. We have analyzed that by decreasing the percentage change in price of 5%, by decreasing the price as 5%, the change in the demand has increased to 10%. So that is why we are calculating percentage price elasticity of demand, that is 10 divided by 5 is equal to 2. How much elasticity is there? By changing the price of the certain product, the demand is now increasing. So it means that it is what is it? It is elastic. It is showing the change by changing the price. So as the answer is more than 1, it means that the product under consideration is relatively elastic. Clear, online students, Aisha and Rabia?
Yes, ma'am.
How can we do it? From here?
No. From the volume key.
Okay, from here. Where is it? This one.
Yeah, this one.
From here, you increase the volume. And the voice is fine now.
No, I'm changing.
You have changed the settings?
Speaker was connected.
Okay. Okay, students, analyze this illustration once again. Try to solve it by yourself. Change in prices. Yes, please calculate. How can we calculate percentage change in prices? In the exam, they are not going to calculate the things for you. So we do know that there is a change in price from 20 to 19. There is a change of 1%, but we have to consider it in percentage. So how do we calculate it in percentage? No? Anyone? Samiha? No idea? 19 minus 20 divided by 20. Got it? From which price do we want to consider a change in? From 20. So our denominator would be 20. Got it? So 19 minus 20 divided by 20 will be giving us 5%. Everyone clear now? The same way we are going to calculate the percentage change in demand. And if the answer is in negative, it means that there is a decrease in price. If the answer is in positive, it means that there is an increase. Okay, now my dear students, the price elasticity of demand can also be calculated by examining total revenue. Students, what is the total revenue? Total income of the organization is known as a total revenue. We can consider that the total amount of earnings from the goods in the normal course of trading is known as revenue. The total income which is earned by selling the goods in the normal course of trading is known as a total revenue. So they say the price elasticity of demand can also be calculated by examining total revenue. This method is most useful to business people. Say, for example, if total revenue increases following a price cut, the demand is price elastic. If the revenue of the organization is increasing because they have decreased the selling price, it means that the product is price elastic. By changing the price, by changing the selling price, this is changing the demand of the particular product. So if the revenue of the organization is increasing following the price cut, it means that the particular product under consideration is price elastic. Then if total revenue increases following a price rise, then demand is price inelastic. So if your total revenue is increasing, if you have followed the price rise also, then the demand is price inelastic. It means that there are other factors which are affecting the demand of the product. If the revenue is increasing even after rising the price, it means that there are other factors which are affecting the demand of the product under consideration. Because if the particular product is price elastic, then the revenue should decrease. If the price is rising, then the revenue should be decreasing. If the product is elastic one, price elastic. Okay, now dear students, we are going to discuss the concept of cross elasticity of demand. What is the cross elasticity of demand? Let's read. Cross elasticity of demand, which is going to be denominated as cross ED, measures the sensitivity of the demand for one good to changes in the price of the another good. So if we are changing the price of the another good and whether it is affecting the price demand of the good under consideration, this is known as cross elasticity of demand, as we have considered in the case of substitution also. Some goods are complementing each other, some goods are substituting each other. So in that case, we can discuss the concept of cross elasticity of demand by changing the price of one substitute, whether there is a change in the demand of the other substitute or not. This is known as cross elasticity of demand. Cross elasticity of demand measures the sensitivity of the demand for one good to change in the price of another good. The formula for cross elasticity of demand is given below. Cross elasticity of demand is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded of good A divided by percentage change in the price of the good B. If we are bringing the change in the price of good B, whether it is affecting the demand of the good A or not. By changing the price of one substitute product, whether it is bringing the change in the demand of the other product or not, this will be known to us by calculating cross elasticity of demand. Cleared? They say, for example, suppose the cross elasticity of demand of butter with respect to margarine is positive 1.5. And the price here, the sign is important, okay? Positive 1.5. And the price of margarine falls by 6%. We can estimate that the demand for the butter will decrease by 1.5 multiplied by 6% is equal to 9%. The sign of cross elasticity of demand. In this case, my dear students, you can consider that the substitutes are there. Margarine and butter are the substitutes to each other. So in that case, we can see that if we are changing the price of the margarine, it will be affecting the demand of the butter. So normally we can see that the demand is going to decrease by rising the price. But in this case, when we are rising the price, the demand is also going to increase, but for the substitute product. Got it? So that is why they are trying to explain over here that suppose the cross elasticity of demand of butter with respect to margarine is positive 1.5, it means that they are positively correlated. By hiring the price, by increasing the price of the butter, we are seeing the increase in the demand of margarine. So they are positively correlated, not negatively correlated. and the price of the margarine falls by 6%. We can estimate that demand for butter will decrease by 1.5 multiplied by 6% is equal to 9%. They have just put the values in the formula. Got it? The price elasticity, the cross elasticity demand of butter with respect to margarine is 1.5. You can place 1.5 over here, and the price of the margarine falls by 6%. So the percentage change in the price of the good B in the denominator, you can put 6%. We can estimate the demand for the butter will decrease by, we are going to take this denominator over here, 1.5 multiplied by 6%. The percentage change in the demand of the butter will decrease by 9%. Getting my point over here? The cross elasticity of demand is 1.5. The percentage change in the price of good B over here, the price of the margarine is falling by 6%. So this is 6%. In order to calculate the percentage change in the quantity demanded of the margarine would be then 6% multiplied by 1.5%. So it will be 9%. Got it? Now over here they say that the sign of the cross elasticity of demand is important to be followed. What does this say? When looking at price elasticity demand earlier, the key consideration was whether the figure was greater or smaller than 1. If it was greater than 1, it means that the product is relatively elastic. Am I right? If it was lesser than 1, it is inelastic. But over here with cross elasticity of demand, the key issue is the sign. Whether the elasticity is positive or negative. In the preceding activity, the cross elasticity demand between butter and margarine was positive. This is because butter and margarine are substitutes. When the price of the margarine went down, the demand for the margarine rose and the demand of butter fell. Consumers switched to buying more cheaper margarine instead of butter. In other words, the price of margarine and demand for butter move in the same direction. So the cross elasticity demand is positive. When both are moving in the same direction, the price increase in the one substitute is bringing the demand, increase in demand of the other substitute. The answer to the calculation would be positive. If they are negatively correlated, like we are going to see in the case of complements, the products to complement each other as well. Say, for example, the toys and the batteries, they are complements for each other. If the prices of the toys are going to increase, the prices of the toys are going to increase, the demand for the batteries is going to decrease. So they are complements for each other. The answer to the question, the answer to the calculation will be negative because both of the products now will be going in the opposite directions. Getting my point? So over here, the signs are important. So in the case of substitutes, you are going to see the positive correlation. In the case of complements, you are going to see the negative correlation. Let's see. Okay, so I have given you the example of complements. Here I think that this is not included. Yes, it's not included, but are you clear about the case of complements? We are going to see the normal negative correlation as we do see in the case of normal demand and supply. Now, supply, what is the concept of supply? It is from the employers, from the organization side, that how many goods or services are being supplied in the market. And as per the demand, the supply must be. Whatever the demand of the products or the services is there, according to that, the supply of the goods and services should be present in the market. Am I right? So they say a supply curve shows how many units producers should be willing to offer for sale at different prices over a given period of time. So my dear students, if you can see, when the price is increasing, the supply is also increasing. The supply is also going to increase. Can you see the quantity supplied is also increasing? So, or you can say when the quantity supplied is getting increased, the prices are going to be higher, so that the demand is going to be lower. Then when the price is going to become higher, the demand is going to be lower, and the quantity supplied will be lesser in the market. Then, getting my point? So contrary to the graph of the demand, which was like this, the supply curve is like this, going upward. With the increase in price, the supply is also increasing. So they say, again, let's read. A supply curve shows how many units producers would be willing to offer for sale at different prices. Obviously, when the price is increasing, the suppliers do want the more quantity to be supplied in the market, because the prices are higher, their revenue will be higher automatically. So would be willing to offer for sale at different prices over a given period of time. Okay, a change in the factors other than the price will move the supply curve itself. So same as we have seen in the case of demand, when there are other factors which are bringing the change in the supply, then there will be a shift in the supply curve. Instead of contraction and expansion, we are going to see the shift in the supply curve, moving inward or outward. A change in factors other than price will move the supply curve itself. So if you can see, when the price is now increasing, the supply has become more. The supply has shifted from Q1 to the Q. Getting it? When the price is increasing, if say for example, the price is this one, at this point the price is, then the quantity supplied is lesser. When the price is increasing, the quantity supplied has moved outwards. So it means that there is a shift in the supply when there are other factors which are affecting the supply of the goods or services. If this is only the price, then the supply will be upward or downward. That was not upward and downward, we can say contraction and expansion. But in this case, upward and inward movement of the supply curve will be there if there are other factors rather than price only which are affecting the supply. Now they are explaining the concept and upward shift of supply. This means that cost of the supply has increased. At existing prices, less will now be supplied. So when the cost of the supply has increased at existing prices, less will now be supplied, as shown on the upward sloping elasticity supply curve. At price P1, the quantity supplied falls from Q to Q1. So my dear students, they are explaining that if the price is from this point to this point, if it is increasing, our supply curve is going to be moving from S1 to S2. The quantity supplied would be not Q1, but it will be increased to Q. This is what they are explaining. As the supply curve shifts from S2 to S1. So you can see S2 to S1, it is going to be moving upward as the prices are increasing. So when the prices are going to increase, the quantity demanded will be shifting. So this results from higher production costs. When the production costs are higher, students, what is going to be the effect for that? The prices for the products will increase. Am I right? When the prices are going to be increased, the supply would be increasing. Higher production costs, the cost of production may increase because the factors of the production becomes expensive. Thus, conditions such as higher wages cost per unit, higher input prices, and increased interest rates will lead to reductions in the supply. Now, my dear students, normally we do say that whenever there are increase in prices, the supply is going to be increased. But when there are other conditions, in this case, when the prices are increasing, the quantity supplied would be lesser. There would be a lesser supply of goods or services. This is the case of shifting. Indirect taxes, if the taxes are levied on the organization, there are direct taxes as well, and we do have indirect taxes too. If the indirect taxes on the company are going to be levied, the quantity is going to be higher. The prices of the goods or services are going to become higher. And in that case, the supply of goods or services will contract. They will be lesser. Again, there will be a shift in the demand curve. The imposition of an indirect tax, such as VAT, value-added tax, makes supply at existing prices less profitable. With an indirect tax, the cost of production are raised directly because the tax must be paid on each item. The profit margin is reduced as an indirect effect. So when the profit margin is going to be reduced, the prices are going to be lesser in that case. Now, a downward shift of supply can also be there. Like they have given an example also regarding that previous illustration. So lower unit cost may arise from, there can be a downward shift of supply as well. The supply is going to be lesser. Okay, and how this supply can be lesser, this is because of the technological innovations as well. For example, the advances of microchip technology lowered the cost of the computers and lead to large increases in the supply. Sometimes the prices are the same, the selling prices are the same, but still the supply is going to be increased. Why? Because maybe the technological innovations have given the opportunity to the organization, to the company to produce more. Now in the same price, they are able to produce more. So when this is the case, the supply is going to increase because they are able to supply more, even if the prices are remaining constant. Then more efficient use of existing factors of production. When the factors of production like land, money, employees are used more effectively and efficiently, the factors of production cost will be lesser to the organization. When the organization is able to put a control on the factors of production cost, then the cost will be lesser and the supply of the goods and services will be higher in the market. Then lower input prices such as cheaper raw material, imports and lower price components could bring down production costs. So since the production costs are going to be lower, input prices like raw materials and all the inputs which are given to the product are going to be lower, the supply is going to increase, even if the prices are constant. A reduction or abolition of an indirect tax or the application or increase in the subsidy. So my dear students, when the abolishment of the indirect taxes is there, or if the indirect costs are lesser on the organization, again, the selling price, even if it is constant, the cost of production will become lesser and the organization would be able to supply more. Are you clear? Now, my dear students, we are going to discuss the last concept for today, that is about equilibrium. What is the concept of equilibrium? This is where the demand and supply are going to meet. This is the point at which we can say the intended supply and the intended demand is going to be meeting. So this is the most intended point by the sellers and the purchasers. This is the amount of demand by the purchasers. This is an amount of supplier. This is the amount of supplies which is most intended by the suppliers. So this is the point at which the purchasers and the sellers will be most satisfied. It is a point where demand and supply is going to meet each other. So this is the curve of this is the curve of demand. Am I right? Is this the curve of demand? This is the curve of supply. Which one is the curve of supply? Students, this is supply. This is demand. Okay. This is demand, this is supply. So where the demand and supply curve are going to meet each other, this is equilibrium. So they say the graph shows the intended demand and the planned supply at the set of the prices is only at price P, where demand and supply are the same. So this is the point where the demand and supply is same. Got it? If the demand of the consumers and the supply plans of the sellers correspond, then the market is deemed to be in equilibrium. Only at output Q and the price P are the plans of both the sellers and buyers realized. Thus, Q is the equilibrium quantity and P is the equilibrium price in this market. So if it is going to be like this, if for example, at Q1, the quantity is Q1 and the price is like this one. It means that the demand and supply is not meeting each other, is it? If Q1 is the demand and the price is over here, it means that we have the supply curve. Supply is this, but the demand is this. We are supplying very lesser than the demand, is it? If we are charging the price at this point, it means that the demand is lesser, but we are supplying very much higher quantity. Is it? Or we can say that the demand is this one, but the amount supplied is this one. It is lesser. So the equilibrium point is that where the demand and supply are coinciding each other and they are equal. And this is the most intended point. So they can ask you in the exam that what is an equilibrium where the demand and supply are going to be same. So they are telling us an example. For instance, at price P. For instance, at price P1, this one, the price of P1. Consumers only want Q1 output. The consumers are only wanting how much of the output students? Q1. This is what they are wanting. This is what the demand is. Getting it? This is what the demand is. But producers are making Q2 output available. But the output which is made available by the suppliers is Q2. Clear? For instance, in the price P1, consumers only want Q1 output, but producers are making Q2 output available. There is a surplus, the excess supply being Q1 and Q2 output. So conversely, at the price P2, the quantity demanded is Q2. So at price P2, the quantity demanded is Q2. Is it? This one is the quantity demanded at P2. Am I right? This is the quantity demanded at this price. But what about the supply? Supply is this. So again, they are not the same. We'll exceed the quantity supplied Q3. This will be a shortage demonstrating the excess demand. Now, my dear students, understanding number 4 is there. When the price of the good is held above the equilibrium price, the result will be, when the price of the good is held above the equilibrium price, the result will be excess demand, a shortage of the good, a surplus of the good, or an increase in demand. Surplus of the good. Okay, let me check. You think me by actually here?
What is the meaning of excess demand?
More demand, exceeding demand, more than what is being supplied or more than what is being required. What did you say, Lisa? Surplus of the? Okay. More excess you can see. Excess of it. Yes, students. What is the answer, Mariam? Have you analyzed? Sabiha, done? What is the answer? Sorry, don't know. When the price of the good is held above the equilibrium price, it means that the intended price is not being taken and the price is now higher than the intended one. What is going to be the effect for that? Demand will go down. Supply will be higher. The supply will be higher because the price is now higher. It is more. The producers will be trying to produce more. They will be trying to supply more. But the demand will be less. Clear? When the prices are higher. So the surplus of the good is going to be there because the demand of the good is lesser and the producers are supplying more, the surplus of the good. So yes, you are very right. It is a surplus of the group. So this is all for today, students. We have finished our slides as well. Now, my dear students, we have finished our chapter number 7. You can say 40% of chapter 7 we have covered. Now, I would like to take a test. Test of chapter 1 to 6 on next Sunday. Okay, there will be 45 minutes test. Okay, from exam kit and study text. From the understandings of study text and exam kit, I will be conducting a test from chapter number 1 to 6 on next Sunday. Clear? There will be a test for F1. Clear, everyone? My online students?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so students, this is all for today. May I end the lecture for today? Any questions? Zaid? No questions? Okay.